Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad you're here with me this morning. Good morning, Carrie, AC, and all of those who are joining us this morning. Happy January 15th. And I can tell you right now, I'm sorry to say Rodney is not with us this morning. He is actually doing some hosting duties at a breakfast in Southern California. So I've got it alone. I hope you'll stick with me and stay with me because I've got a fantastic story to tell you, a true story. And I know it's true because it happened to me. Good morning, Jacqueline. I'm so glad you're here. But first, I want to tell you something a little odd. I'm in Alabama and we're having snow. Now, that's not too odd. The last few years, we've actually had a pretty good snow the last few years. But when I was growing up, snow was so rare that we used to say, it'll snow here when pigs fly. So, y'all, if you're in Alabama, be looking for those pigs up in the sky because it is snowing here right now. We haven't gotten very much, but we've got some. Good morning, Happy. So glad to have you here with us, too. I really hope you're going to enjoy this story, but I hope you're going to take something away from it, too. Because what I really want you to know, and I hope you can hear me okay. Let me put my earbuds in because I think that will improve the sound quality. I forgot to do that before. So let's see if that, okay. And let's make sure we're connected. Oops. There we go. And we are. So can y'all hear me okay? Somebody tell me in the comments that you can hear me. Anybody? Jacqueline, can you hear me okay? Okay, I'm glad you're, yeah, so far so good there. We actually had, Carrie, we had ice here first. Carrie is in Alabama too, so she knows kind of what we're getting, but she's a little south of us. Thank you, Carrie, for telling me I'm good. I appreciate that. All right, so let me roll into this story, and I'm going to tell y'all this is kind of an exclusive because I have told it before in private settings. I've never told it in a public setting. So this is a first, and I don't mind telling you I'm a little nervous about it. But this took place in around 1988, I'm thinking. I was a single mom at the time, and I had two sons who were about 7 and 8 years old. And we were living in a ranch-style house. Now, I was telling this story to my grandkids, and they were like, "What does that mean? What's a ranch-style house?" Well, a ranch-style house, for those of you who don't know, is shaped like a long rectangle. And the garage is at one end, and then you have the common spaces like the living room and the kitchen. And then there's usually kind of a long hallway and the bedrooms at the other end of the house. So that's the sort of house we were in. And this is pertinent to the story. That's why I'm giving you all these details. So one night after we had all gone to bed, I wake up about 1 o'clock in the morning. And there is no reason for me to wake up. I don't even know what woke me up, but I woke up and I was instantly completely alert. And I was already wondering, well, why did I wake up? What in the world? I looked at the clock. It was a little bit after 1. And I thought, great, this is the last thing I need. I need some sleep. So I was trying to get back to sleep, but I became aware of a noise I was hearing. And I could tell it was at the far end of our street. And it sounded like a very rowdy crowd coming down the street. And I thought, what group of people would be up at this hour of the morning and making that much noise on the street? And I could tell it was getting closer and closer. And the closer it got, the more I realized it was a malevolent crowd. In other words, they were up to no good. They were meaning harm. Now, as a single mom, my first thought is, what if they start breaking into my house? What am I going to do to protect my children? So already I'm mapping out a plan in my head. I'm thinking, okay, I need to get up. I need to get my boys up. They were in the bedroom across the hall from me. And I thought, I'll get my boys up. I'll bring them into my bedroom. I'll shut the door. I'll lock it. And at least from in here, I've got a phone. Now, this is 1988, y'all, so we didn't have cell phones back then. We barely even had caller ID. And, but I had an extension, a landline, that's all we had back then. I had that in my bedroom, and I thought, as soon as I get the boys safe in here and the door locked, I will call the police and let them know there's this disturbance outside. But I was also aware, in a way that I can't explain, that somehow I was not hearing that disturbance through my physical ears. I was hearing it somehow through my spirit, which didn't make any sense to me, but I was too scared to stop and try to analyze that. So I tried to get up out of bed to go to my boys, and I couldn't move. I was completely paralyzed. Now panic really set in because I thought, how am I going to take care of my sons? And I was straining and straining to get up. Every muscle in me was straining to get up, and I could not. And I heard that crowd coming closer, and then I heard them seeming go up in the air, and it seemed like they started descending then, and I don't know how to explain this any better. And by this time, I am wondering, am I dreaming this? I hope this is a dream because then I can wake up. But I could hear the crickets outside. I could hear the clock. I could hear lots of things. And somehow I knew, no, this is really happening. And that crowd, I could hear go up in the air and start coming down. And they were coming down through the roof of my house between the garage and the living room, coming into the living room. And they were collecting in the living room and the kitchen. And the thought came to me, when they all get inside, they're coming for you. Now that put me in a panic because I knew I can't get up. I can't protect my boys. If they're coming for us, they're going to get the boys first. They'll be the most vulnerable. I was very, very scared. And so I did the only thing I knew to do. I prayed. But it was just a one-word prayer, maybe 2 words. 2 words. Jesus, help. Help. And as soon as that prayer was out of my mouth, I heard that raucous, malevolent crowd start going back up and going back the way they came. And when I could barely hear them anymore, all of a sudden, whatever had a hold of me and had me paralyzed let go. And I knew it had let go because, remember, I had been straining against it. And suddenly I catapulted out of bed. And I immediately ran across the hall, worried about my boys, thinking, surely this woke them up too, and they're going to be scared. And I went in there, and they are sound asleep, resting peacefully, completely unaware of what was going on. And I wept with relief. I went back to my bedroom. I sat on the bed for a while, and I thought, was that all a dream? But it was so real. And what woke me up? And I don't understand. But my boys are safe. That's all that matters to me. And I thank the Lord. And I had to take about an hour, I think, to calm down because I had been that panicked. And finally, I fell asleep. Well, in the morning, my boys wake up about 6 a.m. And of course, I haven't had much sleep during the night. I can hear them waking up and getting up, and I'm thinking, oh, I was hoping for a little more sleep than this. And I thought, maybe they'll just go watch cartoons and get themselves a bowl of cereal and let me sleep for just a little longer. And thankfully, I heard them going down the hall, and they were discussing that very thing. We're going to get a bowl of cereal, and we're going to watch these particular cartoons. And I thought I was going to get a little more sleep when suddenly one of the boys ran back down the hallway, hollering my name, Mama, Mama, you got to wake up, Mama, you got to wake up. There's maggots in the living room. Now I'm thinking, You got to be kidding me. All the events of the night before were completely gone from my head because now I'm focused on the problem at hand and I'm thinking, maggots. This is not what I wanted to wake up to in the morning. But I got to take care of them. I got to get rid of them. How'd they get in the living room anyway? So I follow my son down the hallway. I get up. I don't even put on any slippers or anything. I follow him down the hallway till we get to the edge of the living room. And my living room floor is completely covered in maggots. I had a parquet wood floor in my living room, carpet in the hallway, and I looked down at my toes, and those maggots were just beginning to crawl into the carpet. But there were at least 50 to 100 maggots on every tile of that parquet wood floor in my living room. And my thought was, oh, somebody, probably one of the boys, left open the cabinet door in the kitchen where we keep the trash can. Flies got in there. Now there's maggots everywhere. How did that happen so fast? It wasn't there last night. But, I got to take care of this. So I go back into the bedroom. I put on a pair of slippers and I go squish, squish, squishing through the living room to get into the kitchen. And I see that the kitchen floor is completely covered in maggots as well. I go to that cabinet, I open up the door, and there are no maggots inside that cabinet. There's no maggots in the trash can. And I'm thinking, I don't understand. Where are they coming from? So I look around and I think, maybe they're coming from the registers, from the air ducts. Something got in there, but the registers were in the ceiling. And of course, it makes sense if the maggots had dropped out of the ceiling that there would be some on top of the furniture and the counters, but there wasn't any. So I go back into the living room and I'm thinking, all right, how do I get rid of maggots? I've had maggots before, but only in an outside trash can and much less than this. But I had tried to kill them before with various things, bleach, insecticide. It just seemed like they wouldn't die. And the only thing I had found that worked was to empty that trash can out on my driveway. And once the maggots got in the sun dried them up. So I thought, well, that's what I'll do this time somehow. I'll sweep those maggots outside. I looked out the window. It's raining. Well, we're not going to be sweeping maggots out the door. So what are we going to do? I thought, I know, vacuum. I'll vacuum them up and then we'll burn the bag afterwards if I have to. So I go to get the vacuum cleaner. I drag it into the living room. My sons are all excited. And my oldest one says, can I do it? Can I do it? And I thought, sure. But I told him, I don't want you doing it willy-nilly. This is a wood parquet floor. There are rows and rows of tiles. I want you to take one row at a time and, from where you are, and do it systematically. One row, then the next row, then the next row, because I don't want us to miss any areas. So he is doing that. I go get the broom. I give the dustpan to the other son, and I start trying to sweep them up. And after a few moments, my son at the vacuum says, Mama, I vacuumed up about 4 rows here of tiles, and wherever I vacuumed, it seems like they just keep coming back in the same spot. They're not crawling from other places. It's like they just reappear. Now, about this time, I'm thinking, I feel like I have just been dropped down into the Amityville Horror. Do y'all remember that? Anybody else old enough to remember the Amityville Horror? It was a house in Amityville. I think that's in Pennsylvania, somewhere up in the New England states, that had some kind of demonic possession of it. And they had all these horrible things happening so bad that the family ended up leaving the house. Yeah, Carrie, yuck, absolutely. So that's what I was feeling like, very shook and very much feeling like there is something more to this than just these maggots. And I don't know what it is, but I'm very rattled. So I prayed again and I said, Lord, this is too much for me. This is too much for us. We need help. Lord, what do I do? Who can I go to for help? And instantly in that moment, one name comes to my mind, Debbie. Now I knew which Debbie because, her face popped into my head too. But I thought, Lord, I barely know Debbie. I mean, we're friendly, but we're more like acquaintances. And I really like Debbie, and I was hoping to, get to know her better. But Lord, if I call her to help me with this, she's never going to want to come over here again. She's never going to want to be my friend, and I don't blame her. Now, all of this is just flashing through my mind. I was trying to think of someone else, and my mind was just totally blank except for Debbie. So I got on the phone in the kitchen and I called Debbie. And when she answered the phone, I said, Hi, Debbie, this is Nina. And she said, I know. I thought, how did you? Well, I've got bigger things to take care of. So, Debbie, here's what's going on at my house, and I need some help. And Debbie didn't bat an eyelash. She just said, Okay, I'll be there in half an hour. Is it okay if I bring my mother? I'm thinking, now I had seen her mother. I had not met her. This was not the way I wanted to meet her. But I said, sure, why not? So half an hour later, she shows up with her mother. They brought another vacuum cleaner, thankfully, and they start vacuuming and helping me. But after a few moments, Debbie says, Nina, we're noticing that everywhere we vacuum, they seem to reappear. I said, I know. It's weird, isn't it? And Debbie said, Mom and I got to talking, and we think that you need a professional exterminator. I had to tell her, Debbie, I'm a single mom. I don't have any money for that, like at all. And Debbie said, We know. I've already called my dad, and my dad said he would pay for it. Now, I hadn't even noticed her at the telephone. So that tells you how intent I was on getting these maggots out of my living room and kitchen. And I just wept because of their generosity and their empathy, their concern for me. So they called an exterminator. He arrived about a half hour later. By now, we have about, I'd say, 75% of the maggots vacuumed up. And he walks in and he looks around and he's, oh, wow. And then he starts asking me questions. He says, okay, have you had a particular concentration of these maggots near any baseboard? I said, no, they were evenly spread out across the floor, both floors. And he said, have you smelled any bad smells? I said, no. And he explained to me, he said, a lot of times something like this happens. An animal has gotten into the wall, it has died, flies got to it, and of course they laid eggs, it created maggots, and they come out under the baseboard. But then you'd see a concentration of them near that baseboard, or you would have smelled that really bad smell for maybe a while. I said, no, we haven't had anything like that. So he said, okay, let me look around. And he asked if he could go out in the garage. I thought, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that there's something in the garage, maybe a trash can in the garage. But I'd already been out there and looked, and there were no maggots in the garage anywhere. But I told him, have at. He went to it, and we kept vacuuming. He comes in a little while later, and he says, well, I don't know what to make out of this. I can't find a source for them anywhere. And I don't know how they got here, but I can tell you this is the worst infestation I've seen in my 30 years in this business. And I'm thinking, and we've already vacuumed up 75% of them before you got here. I can't even imagine what you would be thinking if you'd seen the whole thing. So he leaves. Eventually, we get them all cleaned up. and Debbie and her mom leave, and they took the vacuum cleaner bags with them. I think they were going to burn them. I hope so. And then my boys go off to their room to play and I guess talk about the exciting things that had happened. And I'm sitting on the couch and I'm feeling very shook and very alone. And I am thinking there is something demonic about that. And why? Why did that happen? And how did that happen to us? And so I ended up calling my pastor. I thought, I have got to tell somebody. And I think, well, he's my pastor. Maybe he would know something. Maybe he could tell me something. So I called my pastor. I was amazed that he answered the phone, but he did. And I told him the whole story. And when I got through, he said, I think you definitely have had a full-on demonic manifestation. But let me ask you a question. Are you hurt? No. Are the boys hurt? No. He said, this is the way the enemy often does. He tries to intimidate us and make us so scared that we take our eyes off of Jesus and we put our eyes on the enemy who seems very powerful. And we're afraid of what he might do next. And at that moment, I got angry. I was angry because it had worked. That's exactly what I had done. I had taken my eyes off of Jesus. I was starting to feel very intimidated, worried about what might be coming next, and wondering why in the world did this happen to us and how did we attract it and what do I do about it? And here was my pastor telling me the enemy tried to intimidate you. And you got your eyes off of Jesus, and that's why you're scared right now. But you have authority over that enemy because Jesus gave it to you. So he told me what to do. Now, fast forward a few days, and my core group is meeting at my house. Now, the core group is kind of like a Bible study group, but more like a life group. You know, we were sharing life with each other. And we met every week at my house in that very living room. And I knew when they came, I thought, if I'm going to be honest about sharing life with them, I'm going to have to tell them about this. So we're sitting there that evening, and I'm telling them the story about the maggots, the whole thing, just as I'm telling it to you. And as soon as I get finished, the lights go out in the living room, and we're sitting there in darkness. And I hear one of the girls in the core group say, be still, my stomach. And another one says, now, wait a minute. We're just feeling nervous because of the story she just told. This is a coincidence. It's just a coincidence. We don't need to be looking for a demon behind every bush. So she said, I'm sure it's just that the light bulb went bad. And I looked around and I said, there were 2 lamps on in this living room, and now both of them are out. And she said, okay, then it's the outlet. Something happened with the outlet. And I said, they're plugged into different outlets. And she said, then it's the fuse. You need to just go to the breaker box and, check the fuse. I said, well, okay, or the breaker, actually, just flip it. I said, yeah, except that the living room and the hallway are on the same breaker. And the hallway light is still on. At that point, she said, okay, I got nothing. And I understood how she felt. I was kind of spooked too, but I remembered what my pastor had told me. And I said, okay, this is the enemy trying to scare us again. So out loud, I said, enemy, I'm telling you right now, you have no authority here. You have no place with us. We have been bought with the blood of the Lord Jesus Christ, and we are covered by his blood, and we are protected by him. and you have no place here, so I command you to leave in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Leave us alone and do not come back." And immediately the lights come back on. Now, I got to be honest, I was just as shocked as anyone else in the room. But right after that happened, one of the ladies in the group said, "I'd always heard of these things, but I always hoped that if I just didn't pay any attention to it, that it would never happen to me, that I would never see it. And this is as close as I ever want to get, and I just don't think I can do this." And I'm sorry to tell you that she never came back to core group again. Now, what I want you to take away from this story, I've only got about 5 minutes left, but is this fact. First off, I told this story to my grandchildren, and my grandchildren begged me to tell it to their cousins. And so when I told it to their cousins, my grandchildren chimed in at the end of the story and said, "Hey, did y'all notice that the dream or whatever it was she had the night before, that when they came into the living room and the kitchen, that it was only the living room and the kitchen where there were maggots? We believe that every place they put their foot, that's where the maggots appeared." Now, the thing is, God woke me up. God alerted me to what was coming, even though I didn't really understand any of it. And when I was paralyzed and I was completely helpless, I called on God for help, and God answered immediately. He sent them packing. The next morning, the evidence that they had been there was there in the room. But once again, when I called on him for help and I said, "This is too much for me. What do I do? Who can help me?" He gave me a name, a specific name. God does answer us immediately and very specifically when we ask him to, and when our ears are attuned to his voice. Now, my ears were attuned not because I was some super spiritual person, but because I was frightened and I knew there was nowhere else to go. I don't know what may be happening in your life. Hopefully, not anything nearly as gross and disgusting as 2 rooms full of maggots. But whatever you have going on, whatever the enemy is trying to intimidate you with, you have authority over that enemy because of the finished work of the Lord Jesus Christ. And he has given you that authority, and you may wield it. And the enemy must flee. And that, I think, is very good news. We have a king, a savior, who is over everything, and he cares for us, and we can depend on him. Now, I felt that way too, Carrie. I was sitting there myself saying, wow, wow, wow. So I'm so glad you joined me for this story and stuck with me this morning. Thank you for letting me tell it here. And I hope you will be of good courage, because God is with us and we are not alone. Bye, everybody. See you next Monday. And Rodney will be back with us, and we have a guest that we haven't had in a while. I'm really excited. See you next Monday. Bye.